There is a saying that practice makes perfect. And boy, do I think that that is the bane of my existence. Because what we need to realize is that practice does not make perfect because perfect doesn't exist. I believe it was Simon Sinek who said that practice does not make perfect. Practice makes improvement.
Welcome to the Sum of Everything podcast, where we discuss a little bit of a lot of topics, ranging from spirituality to finance and everything in between. I'm your host, Aishwarya, a serial hobbyist with an unquenchable thirst for learning, especially through new experiences. In this podcast, we will scratch every itch of curiosity, explore various perspectives, step out of our comfort zone, and experience some of everything. Because after all, we are just that, a sum of all our experiences. So, let's dive right in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new edition of the Sum of Everything podcast. I am Aishwarya, and I'd like to start off this episode by wishing you all a very happy and prosperous New Year 2025. Now, I know it's been a really long time since you last saw a notification that said a new episode of Sum of Everything had been released. And you're right. It's been a very long time since I actually sat and recorded an episode. At the beginning, I had very valid reasons. At least I thought I did. I was extremely busy and I had other things in my life that were taking priority. And I just didn't have the time or the energy to put into this passion project of mine. But as the weeks turned into months, my excuses started sounding more and more ridiculous, even to me. And even I started wondering why I was hesitating so much to just sit down and vocalize my thoughts. There were people who even asked me about my podcast and wondered why I hadn't uploaded an episode in forever. In fact, some of these people were people I didn't even know were listening to my podcast. And these people looked forward for an episode week after week. For starters, to these people, I'm really, really grateful because you showed me that you had confidence in me and you actually wanted to listen to what I had to say. However, while I was really grateful, I also became very anxious because there were actually people who had expectations of me, of this podcast, that I had started with absolutely no expectations of my own. And suddenly these expectations started to look like a mountain that I could not climb and didn't want to start. And that's when I realized that my old nemesis, perfection, had reared its ugly head. In fact, you'd be surprised to know that I had even recorded an episode that featured a guest. And I simply was unable to upload it or release it because it didn't quite meet my exacting standards of what I thought a podcast should sound like. And that's when I realized that this ugly monster called perfection had seeped into areas of my life that I didn't even know, and its clutches on me were so deep that I couldn't even fathom it. I also realized that I had always been like this. I had been so obsessed with being perfect in every area of my life and to not make any mistakes that it had become debilitating. Be it exams in school, my performance on stage, any creative work whatsoever, I simply was not satisfied unless, in my head, I was perfect. And it didn't matter to me what other people thought. If they thought I was good enough or amazing, no. If it wasn't perfect, according to my standards, it was not good enough. You know how you can see the smallest blemishes and scars on your face and you obsess over them, but it's absolutely invisible to another person's eye? But you can't help but notice it and you do anything and everything to hide that or conceal that. That's what it felt like. My imperfection felt like a weakness, a shameful thing that I could not show the outside world. The smallest imperfection felt to me like it was a failure on my part, something that I shouldn't be, something that I should feel ashamed about. Imperfection was intolerable, And if I was not going to do something perfectly, then there was absolutely no point in starting. That was my mindset. And so if I wasn't confident that I could do something and absolutely ace it, I just wouldn't do it. This wasn't just limited to studies or work. I took nearly a year and a half simply to get back into dancing because I had lost confidence that I could actually move my body the way I used to. It took me a really long time to start a new form of dance because I had to hype myself up and tell myself that it was okay if I made mistakes and that I was an infant in a new form of dance. And that an infant and a toddler, they don't run the minute they are able to stand on their two legs. They walk and fall all the time. Perfection had taken such an indomitable hold on me that I was refusing to live my life and I was refusing to allow myself to be human. Now, the reasons for this, I honestly think it would take several sessions of therapy to figure out. So I'm not going to bore anyone over here. But what I did realize is that thankfully, I wasn't the only one who felt like that. Not only were there others who had similar experiences, but they had managed to actually overcome it as well. So a quick Google search told me that there was something called perfectionism procrastination paralysis. Now, if you have been with me since episode 1, you know that it took me a really long time to even sit and record the first episode. And I remember saying that I had analysis paralysis. I now know that there is an actual name for it. It's called perfection paralysis. Perfection paralysis is when you refuse to start something or you procrastinate tasks because you don't know if you're going to be able to finish it perfectly. And if you're not able to do something perfectly, then what is the point of even starting? This mindset had such a tight hold on me that my room was messy for the longest period of time, and my mother just got tired of telling me to clean it up. Because I couldn't just fold clothes and put them away. I had to fold clothes and put them away in the perfect manner, which meant that I had to clean my whole wardrobe, which meant that I had to take out everything, fold them in the absolute perfect manner, hang them up correctly, and that just took too long. Similarly, I couldn't put away my makeup because then I had to reorganize the entire makeup collection. And anybody who knows me knows just how vast that collection is. But evidently, perfectionism didn't just end at my organizational skills. It had pervaded even my thoughts. I had, for the longest time, refrained from sharing the deepest, darkest thoughts with even my best friend, to the extent that she had a warped sense of who I was as a person. She had always seen me as a person who strived to be the best at everything. So that made me the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect friend, which translated to the fact that in her mind, I couldn't have a bad thought. I couldn't make mistakes. I was simply not allowed to. And that made me miserable because I had just randomly woken up one day after years of not sharing too much information and let her into my head and expected her to be completely accepting about it, which was a little difficult for her as well because here's this person who had always been appropriate and always said the right thing and did the right thing. And suddenly, this person was behaving rather strangely and saying rather strange things. When you look at it from her perspective, her best friend had just woken up a different person. Of course, eventually, my friend and I had a conversation where we sorted it all out. But it did get me thinking that I really could not let this continue and that I had to do something about it with a certain level of urgency. So I did what I do best and read up about it and dove quite headlong into articles that talked about perfectionism and procrastination and how to overcome something like this. What I discovered was that people like me who suffer from perfectionism, and yes, I am choosing to categorize it as an illness, believe that there are only two outcomes for anything that we do. Either we perform flawlessly on the task at hand and exceed all expectations, or we fail miserably. If you were to put it on a scale of 0 to 100, really bad would be about 50 to 70%. Quite good would be 80 and above, and excellent would be 100%. But we don't aim for a scale of 0 to 100, do we? We aim for 150%, which is where perfect lies, outside of that scale. So the very first thing that we need to do is reject this two-outcome model and realize that perfection isn't a standard that needs to be aimed for. What we need to aim for is progress. There is a saying that practice makes perfect. And boy, do I think that that is the bane of my existence. Because what we need to realize is that practice does not make perfect because perfect doesn't exist. I believe it was Simon Sinek who said that practice does not make perfect. Practice makes improvement. And the example he gave was that we show up every day in the morning to brush our teeth for 2 minutes. And that is what keeps our teeth healthy. That's what maintains our dental hygiene, as opposed to waking up one day and then like brushing our teeth for an hour or two without doing it for a whole month. That's going to do nothing for our teeth. It's the fact that we wake up every day and brush our teeth for 2 minutes that's keeping them healthy. Practice makes improvement. And those are words that I have tried to imbibe and live by for some time now. Show up every day to the task at hand so I can improve just a little bit, even if it is by a micro percent. Even that micro percent helps. Showing up every day helps. We all know that slow and steady wins the race. We all know the story of the tortoise. But how many of us actually put it into practice? I know I didn't for the longest time. It's just something that I read and then forgot to imbibe. So our aim needs to be progress over perfection. Finishing a task at hand is better than doing it perfectly. But then you'll ask me, how, Aishwarya? How should we go about finishing something when even the thought of starting it seems like an impossible task to do? Well, this one is easy, isn't it? We just have to break up a large task into smaller bits. Easier said than done, isn't it? When I was studying, or rather the last time I had something to study, I had chapters that would go on for pages and pages and pages and pages and pages, which basically meant that I had to study for several hours a day, easily 8 to 10 hours a day. It just seemed so daunting that I didn't even want to begin. On days like these, what really helped me was a technique called Pomodoro. Now, if you don't know what Pomodoro is, it's basically breaking up a period of time into smaller periods of work and rest. For fitness enthusiasts, it's the work version of an HIIT workout. So you have about 20 to 25 minutes of time where you work and a compulsory 5 to 7 minute break in between. And if you do 4 Pomodoros like this, you've completed 2 hours of study, after which you can take a longer break. Now, this is a technique that can be used not just for studying, but for working, for cleaning, or for literally any task at hand. Just 20 to 25 minutes of focused work with short bursts of 5-minute breaks in between. Now, one way is to divide your time in a way that makes it seem like we don't have a vast, unending period of work ahead of us. But another thing is to ensure that we set smaller goals to achieve the larger task at hand. Something I do very often is that if I have a really large contract to review, I divide that contract up into sections and work section wise. So, for instance, section 2 goes on for 3 pages, and I tell myself, okay, I just have to sit and review section 2. So instead of a 40-page contract, all I have to do is review 3 pages. That seems a lot more doable. And at the end of that section 2, I give myself a break. Because not only do I need it, it's because I have also just completed a task and therefore I deserve a reward. Allowing ourselves to celebrate our wins, no matter how small the win is, and rewarding ourselves for finishing even a small goal is supremely important for us to feel motivated enough to continue doing what we're doing. And with all this, it's also really, really important to keep in mind that sometimes we may not be able to achieve those goals or reach the milestones that we've set in mind. Now, instead of berating ourselves for not doing what we set out to do or not completing what we had in mind, we should learn to be compassionate towards ourselves. We should learn to tell ourselves that it's okay that we didn't meet a goal for the day, that we didn't complete something. It's okay. It's not the end of the world, and it's not the question of someone's life. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. We have to be kind to ourselves. We have to want to live with ourselves because we're the only ones who are going to be our forever companions. Speaking of companions, it is also helpful to seek help and support from those who genuinely want the best for us in a healthy way. People who encourage us but remind us that we don't need to be perfect to be successful. And finally, potentially the most interesting thing that I have come across in all the articles that I have read on this topic, it is important to practice imperfection. To do things that we know we're going to be bad at and to do them over and over again. Because only by practicing failing can we practice lifting ourselves up and dusting ourselves off and starting over. Now, it is the new year, and January is usually the month that most of us have resolutions that we've made, goals that we've set for ourselves for the year. And usually, by February or March, we either tend to lose track or simply derail ourselves because the goals that we've set may be looking a little too difficult for us to achieve. To that end, I want to encourage everyone to just stick to the goal that you've set for yourself doggedly. It's okay if you fail. Be consistent. Show up. You'll eventually get there. And forget about perfection. Forget about doing it right. Just do it. That's more than enough. At least that's what I'm going to be telling myself because I am not a perfect person. I'm perfectly imperfect in my own way. And that's the episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this helps you. And if it doesn't help you now, I hope you're able to store it away to come back to it when you need it. I promise to be a little bit more regular with the episodes. So for those of you who've been asking about it, thank you. And I promise I will be more consistent. With that, I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.